I left Grand Lake on my birthday. On my way out of town, I got breakfast at the Sagebrush Barbecue. It was a great way to start the day of hiking. The trail goes right through town. As I approached Shadow Cliff Mountain Lodge north of town, I ran into Rocket coming out of the bunkhouse. He was going into town to resupply. He asked me if I was going to go to Halfway Days in Rawlins. I had never heard of that event. Rawlins is just 3 town stops north in Wyoming. While I was hiking out of town, I still had signal, so I looked it up. If I could walk into Rawlins on the day of the festivities if I just kept a good pace. The woods north of Grand Lake were in Rocky Mountain National Park. Hikers had a choice to go straight north or a more circuitous route. No matter which way you go, you can't camp in the RMNP unless you have a permit and a bear can. I went straight north since I could get through fast enough so I wouldn't have to camp. Since it was my birthday, I kept airplane mode off all day so people could call me. While I was still near town, my dad called and wished me happy birthday. Unfortunately, the entire shortcut was through burnt-out woods. You could see forever through the standing dead trees. It was kind of spooky seeing so far into the dead woods and not seeing any animals. The trees creaked and swayed in the wind. At the foot of the dead giants, new growth was sprouting up. The dead trees continued all the way to Route 34. I followed Route 34 for a while. When the trail left 34, I wish I had looked ahead in far out. I could have saved a few miles and a lot of elevation had I stayed on the route until the trail crossed it again. Oh, CDT, you got me this time, but I'm coming for you. At the crossing, I followed a dirt road that can't really be used anymore. At a bridge, I was mesmerized by the water passing underneath. Another bridge had a unique build style I had not seen before. Slowly, I climbed up to a bowl. I met Box Troll and Road Dog as they passed me, but I was so out of breath and tired, I only spoke nonsense. At the end of the day, the wind calmed down and got pretty warm. At this saddle, I had cell reception, so I returned a call to my son Riley, where he wished me a happy birthday. I also called Dawson to hear his voice. I was pretty sure I wouldn't have cell reception when he tried to call me later. I was surprised how lonely I felt. I found a mosquito-ridden spot next to a meadow to camp. The morning was cold and the wind was already kicking up. I was surprised by how many trees in the burn zone were nearly burnt through at the base, but were still standing. On a windy ridge, I passed a lady named Dottie, who told me if I wanted a donut, I should grab one from her ice chest near Highway 125. She was doing trail magic for her friends that were somewhere behind me. I sat at the road eating the donut when Zip drove up. I helped him set up trail magic for his partner's friend. I met her the day before. Her name was Val, aka Box Troll. Another gentleman arrived who was picking up his pastor who was hiking Sobo. I had a Gatorade, a beer, a bratwurst, and a bunch of fruit. I had cell reception at the last ridge, so I received a series of texts with pictures of my birthday card from Julie. Between that and hanging out with the other hikers under the canopy, I felt like I'd finally had my birthday. There was a crowd of about 12 people when I left for the ascent to Parkview Mountain. On the hill, Box Troll and Road Dog passed me again, and once again, I spoke nonsense because I was tired and out of breath. I got a message from Nate. He warned me about how tough the Parkview Mountain was. I looked at the topo and came up with a plan to avoid it. I thought it was brilliant. I'd go around the bend and then traverse a bowl at the same elevation on the other side so I could join the trail after the traverse, having not gone up or down. It was crazy windy, at least 80 miles per hour, but some of the gusts seemed to go up to 100. I thought about taking off my hat and putting it in my backpack, but the sun was so intense. Besides, my sun hoodie had always been able to keep my hat in place before. About 20% across the traverse, my hat flew off. Amazingly, it got stuck in some rocks 60 to 80 feet above. I've worn that hat for 4,000 miles, so I started climbing up. By the time I got to where it should have been, it was gone. By the time I got to where it should have been, it was gone. I figured I could climb higher and maybe I'd get lucky. Did I mention I wore it for 4,000 miles? Eventually, I accepted the hat was gone and probably in the next county. I will remember you. I will remember you. When I gave up, I was about 200 feet below the red line, so I changed my plan and just climbed to the trail. I crawled to the top using my hands. At the top, I was no longer protected from the wind in any way. When the gusts got bad, all you could do was just sit down. Crossing along the saddle was tough, but the Parkview Mountain hut was there beckoning me on. I took a long break in the hut to enjoy lunch. Unfortunately, the wind just got stronger while I was inside. I think Parkview Mountain is named because it has a view of the Rocky Mountain National Park. Unfortunately, the view was obscured by the fires in Utah and the massive mountain wilderness. I'd be hatless for the next 2 days. Looking for a campsite was tough. Finding a place without wind that was flat and without widowmakers seemed impossible. You can really tell that the fires are burning at sunset. After 19 miles, I got to a parking lot at a trailhead. The 3 women who got the donut trail magic were already camped there. They got a ride to avoid Parkview Mountain. In the morning, I quickly got back above the tree line and started getting battered by the wind. Firecracker passed me, but we couldn't talk because of all the wind. I could really use a break from fighting the wind. When I saw what I thought was a geocache at a trail junction, I took that break. It was just a trail log, but it was a good excuse to rest for a few minutes. At 1 p.m., a switch was flipped and the wind suddenly stopped. It actually got hot enough to use the snowball trick. The high routes are kind of pleasant when there's no wind. 11 miles in a day, I hit the first of a series of dirt roads that would bring me to asphalt. While I was hustling down the road, Nate messaged me. He was in Steamboat Springs, and if I could get there, I could share a room. I told him I didn't think there was any way I could make it to Steamboat Springs that night. That being said, I was flying at 3 miles per hour. I didn't need to walk all the way to Highway 40 to hitch to Steamboat. I just needed to get to the 14 where I could stick out my thumb, but that would be a 30-mile day. The sun was getting low when I saw cows. I hadn't seen cows from the trail since before Cuba, New Mexico. At 8, I could see the 14 going back towards town, but it wasn't until 8:30 that my feet hit asphalt. I walked the road towards town while I hitched. The 9th vehicle to pass was driven by Robert, a hotshot driver. He was delivering a vehicle to Texas. He couldn't drive me all the way to Steamboat, but he could get me close. I just had 1.5 miles to get to Nate's hotel. This roadside had birds living in it. Fortunately, one restaurant was open on the way to the hotel where I could get some food. Trail stop checklist. Steamboat Springs. Check.